leave it to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm Michelle Davies. I work at the University of Central Lancashire, which is in Preston. I'm a chartered psychologist. I work as a senior lecturer in psychology, mainly teaching on forensic psychology, and I lead on the topics to do with victimology, victims of crime, and so on. My research area that I did my PhD in and that my current research is on male rape, mainly attitudes towards male rape, but I've been involved in projects to do with the effects of male rape, which is what I'm going to be presenting today. Okay. This project was actually Jane Walker's PhD, and she started data collecting in the late 1990s. And she must have had the longest PhD programme in the history of the universe, because she ended up getting her PhD in about 2005. So this was an ongoing project for several years, collecting data about the experiences of male rape survivors from the community across the UK. So this presentation today, I'm discussing the experiences of the guys that Jane spoke to and the research that has come from that initial set of data collection. Has it done it?
Sometimes it plays a button.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so at the time this project started, there was very little in the academic literature, and if you're an academic, if it isn't in the academic literature, then we just don't know about it. It's as simple as that. There was a little bit of clinical stuff, there was some prevalence data and so on, but very little at the time about the experiences of male survivors. Other than, there was some American stuff, there was some prison stuff, but extremely scant about how men experienced rape, or experienced the effects of rape in just, in community samples. So what Jane wanted to do was to really plug that gap, and that's where her PhD started. She wanted to look at the specific effects that came from the experience of rape in adult men, okay, which that was her idea, and in hindsight, what we should have done was collect data from men who'd experienced abuse in childhood and then compared that to men who'd experienced rape in adulthood. But we didn't, or rather she didn't. So this data is only about men who'd been raped from the age of 16 onwards. So it's kind of missing out a whole chunk of people. Although, when we looked at the demographics, some of the guys had been raped in adulthood, but had been abused as children. So, but it was a minority. So we've got those limitations that I want to kind of point out to you right from the outset. But what she wanted to do was to collect data from a community sample from a diverse set of backgrounds and so on, rather than the clinical stuff. I think we don't need to go through this. We all know what the effects of rape are in both men and women. The point that I really want to highlight today is the long-term issues that came out of our research, which I'm going to talk more about later on. Okay, so the sample then was 40 male rape survivors who had been raped from the age of 16 plus. They were all British, and they were collected through the media. Okay, so and basically Jane contacted newspapers, magazines. She just hounded the press for about 11 months, whether to post adverts in papers. The Daily Telegraph were very, very good. They posted the ad several times, free of charge. Loot were very good. The gay press were very good. But the tabloids wouldn't touch it at all. So there are limitations in the way that she recruited, but she did really well. Given that, as I said, this data was being collected in the late 1990s, and she was facing hurdle after hurdle because of the taboos to do with just talking about I want to study, I want to look at. It was very, very difficult at that time. She got 52 men to telephone her originally, based on the advert. So they read the advert and rang her up. After a short telephone sort of interview detailing what the nature of the research was and so on, 12 guys decided that they didn't want to continue. So she ended up with 40. Okay. The average age was 34 at the time that she collected the data from them. But the average time of assault was 24. Okay, so we're looking at guys who'd been raped on average 10 years previous to talking to Jane. Okay, so we're looking at generally long-term effects. The range of was from several months to many, many years. Okay, but the average was 10 years. The majority were gay, but that's probably not surprising given that quite a lot of these guys came from adverts posted in the gay press, who were quite helpful in getting the word out and so on. Okay. 5% said that they were asexual, that they had no sexual preference, no sexual feeling at all, which was interesting in its own right, but we didn't obviously have enough to do any sort of meaningful comparisons on. Also interestingly, but perhaps not surprising, they were all white. She did try to get ethnic minority interest, but there was no way she could include people who would not come forward. So that's another acknowledged limitation. And there was a greater than average, or what we would expect, unemployed or kind of working in very low paid jobs, which not really sure what to make of that, given that the recruitment was sort of across quite a good range of the press. 15% had been raped previously, 7.5% in childhood. When it was a multiple victimisation experience, we asked them to talk about their most recent experience. Okay. And she also, later on, she collected data from a matched control group. So these were guys who were matched on age, sexual preference, occupational status, educational status, ethnicity, etc., to compare the psychological functioning of the guys who'd been raped versus a control group who had never experienced any sexual abuse at all. Okay. So what she gave them, and it was an extensive set of questionnaires. She sent them out to an address of their choice. She compiled what she called the male rape questionnaire, which was 75 items detailing, and the majority of this questionnaire was actually asking them to explain in their own words how they felt. So she asked them about the experience of the assault, how they felt during the assault, immediately after the assault, how they felt now. And the transcripts, the guys had written sometimes extensively. So there was a great deal of richness in the data that Jane received. And several of the guys said that it was the first time they'd ever talked about the rape to anyone, even though it was just kind of writing it down to a virtually anonymous person who they'd spoken to once on the phone. They'd never voiced it in any way, okay, whether it was verbally or written. So this was the first time they were talking about their assault. She also asked them quite a lot of sort of yes or no responses. So, do you feel more depressed now than you did? Do you feel more anxious? And so on. So they were yes or no's. And then she had some psychological measures. The general health questionnaire, a questionnaire that looked at how they felt about the world. Okay, so those kind of general questions about your world assumptions, how you feel that the world has treated you, and so on. A self-esteem questionnaire and a measure of post-traumatic stress. Okay, so that was kind of the science bit, if you will. So she had the male rape questionnaire, which was very rich in data about their experience in their own words, and then she did the science bit with the psychological measures. And it was those 4 psychological measures that she compared with the matched control group. Okay.